Okay, hello and welcome to the Eagle and Child podcast. I am super excited to be talking about C.S. Lewis with one of my brilliant friends, Chris Palmer, today. Absolute legend. If you don't know Chris Palmer, to know him is to love him. He is probably most known as the meme lord behind Theos U memes, but he is also a pastor. He is a professor at Moody. He is also teaching for Theos University and Theos Seminary, and he's an author as well. So he's written a whole bunch of books. He's a Greek scholar. I think he's got his own podcast on Greek for the Week. So if you want to know anything about that, go hit that up. But Chris, you fit a lot into your, 36 years of life? Is there anything else I missed?
Yeah, going on 37. I'm getting there. I'm getting up. I'm starting to look at 40 now. So hopefully
you're
I've done
40.
something with my life. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I think I did miss something. You're doing your PhD in Pentecostal theology.
Yeah.
Absolutely insane. And you, before COVID, you would travel the world to minister as an evangelist, right?
Yeah, it's so weird to think that. Yeah, there was an aspect of my life that was before COVID, and now it's like I travel to the grocery store. So what am I doing?
Yeah, exactly. Big journeys. Going places.
Thank you for thank you for having me on this podcast. And you know, I think you're brilliant, and the work that you're doing is essential. So to be with a mind like yours, I just hope that I do this podcast justice. You know, I hope I do it well.
I'm sure you will. And if you don't, John Adams and I were talking about this last week. If you don't, we'll just re-record it with him. We'll get him to do the C.S. Lewis podcast. Nah, absolutely joking. Look at the list. Are amazing. You're amazing.
I'm gonna look at the list and see like I'm not on there. Like, did they wash me from this? Like, did I?
Yeah.
Is that what happened?
You've been scrubbed. Yeah. You've been cancelled, Chris. It wouldn't be the first time.
You got guys like John and Jacob and all these guys who know Lewis. I'm like, I got big shoes to fill here. I got to have some tough critics, you know.
The pressure is on. The pressure is on, Chris.
Gosh,
but I have full confidence in you.
Well, you know that I was telling you the reason that I qualify for this is I've been to the Mecca. I have been.
You have.
Eagle and Child. I was there.
You've been to the Eagle and Child in Oxford. Tell us about it. I've never been there, so I'm very, very jealous. But tell us about the Eagle and Child.
You don't sense the anointing on me, the Inkling anointing all over me, right?
It's coming through the screen right now. I'm just going to stretch out my hands and receive it.
I was in London shortly before COVID, before the world changed. I was teaching a Greek seminar, a hermeneutic seminar, as well as like a revival meeting. So we did like Greek and revival stuff and put it all together for an academic, spiritual conference, one of a kind. And the pastor's like, what do you want to do? You want to go see Big Ben? And I'd seen all that before. I says, no, I want to go to Oxford. What do you want to do at Oxford? I said, I want to go to the Mecca of where the greatest minds in the world have been. He's never been to Oxford. This guy lives in London. He's never been there. I know. He's never
Somebody
been there.
Put that guy in jail. That's a crime.
Life sentence, right? Life sentence. Never let him out.
Yeah.
He's like, I've never been I wanted to see the Bodleian Library. I want to see all this stuff. But I wanted to see the Eagle and Child. You know, I wanted to go where Lewis was at. He's like, I've never been there. So me, the American, gave him the tour of Oxford the whole time, right?
Yeah.
So we went in
typical American style.
I told him, I was like, if you ever want to see London or Cambridge, call me. I'll take you for a tour.
Let me teach you.
Let me teach you about your city here a little bit, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, I've always been a Lewis fan ever since I can remember. I read the Screwtape Letters when I was in 9th grade, reading Screwtape Letters, right? Wow. And everybody's playing, you know, Nintendo and Game Boy, and I'm reading Screwtape Letters.
Why did you start reading it? How did you get into that? Who encouraged you to read?
A girl from my class gave it for a girl. That's for a girl. She's like, read this. I'm like, you're cute. Okay, I'll read it.
Yeah. And whatever you want.
Yeah. And my dad saw me reading. He was like, what are you doing with C.S. Lewis? I was like, I don't know. Should I not be reading? I was like, I don't think you're going to understand that. And I didn't understand everything he was saying. I understand the majority of it. So ever since then, I've been a fan of his. We went into the Eagle and Child. We had fish and chips. We had ale. I'm not going to say if it was alcoholic or non-alcoholic, but it was ale.
Mm-hmm.
It was good, right? It may or may not have been alcoholic ale.
Can't confirm or
And it
deny.
was, I can't confirm or deny. It
Mm.
depends who's asking the question.
Mm-hmm.
And no, it was a great time. And then we went into, I wanted to eat in the rabbit room because that's where the Inklings would all meet,
Very
is
cool.
in the rabbit room. But there was like a family eating it. I wanted to kick them out. Like, you out. I'm from America.
Do you even know C.S. Lewis? Have you even read the Screw Tape Letters? How many C.S. Lewis books have you read?
Exactly. Did you even know what the problem of pain is? No, I don't think you know that. So
they're just having dinner. They're just like a British family looking for a cheap meal on a Tuesday night.
Yeah, like they went on TripAdvisor and found this place. I didn't even know the significance of it, right?
Yeah.
It was great. We had a great talk, and you could see the waiter or the whoever was there was annoyed because they kept asking all these, questions, but it was great to be there and just to see where him and the Inklings would meet, where him and Tolkien would sit there and others who were part of that group, and do their talking and sit around, read manuscripts that they thought were good or not good, and more or less. So I'm in. So I qualify. I don't even know. I don't have to know anything about C.S. Lewis. I know more than anyone who hasn't been there, right?
You've been immersed in C.S. Lewis's natural habitat. So by osmosis, exactly. you are C.S. Lewis.
I'm C.S. Lewis, and I would go back again. I mean, I can't wait to get back there and do it. Oxford's a really cool town.
Mm-hmm. It's very cool.
I wanted to buy some of the what do you call it? Not the plaid. What's the plaid called? I'll think of it after the podcast. They get all the Oxford, hats and tweed jackets. That's it. They sell tweed there. It's expensive.
Yeah, nice.
The pipes and I'm like, this is cool when I'm here and I get home into America. I'm not going to know what to do with this. So I didn't buy anything.
Yeah. So. You're not going to walk around with your pipe and your jacket, your tweed jacket.
Unfortunately, yeah. Just to remind myself that I'm me and not smart guy, just trying to be smart, So there you go.
No, you're very smart, very intelligent guy. You are actually my PhD research Yoda. I think I should mention that to everyone as well. Anytime I'm struggling, I'm like, Chris, send me a chapter.
Here's some articles. Let me help you out with this.
Yeah, exactly. Write my thesis for me.
I hope I'm a good Yoda, because then when you have someone who needs you to be a Yoda, you know how to be a Yoda to them, right?
Yeah, no one's asking me to be a Yoda. Let's be honest.
Right.
No, that's very cool. Okay, so for the people watching who haven't had much of a background in C.S. Lewis, maybe have read Mere Christianity or watched the Chronicles of Narnia, why do we as Christians need to know about C.S. Lewis? Like, why is he a great mind and thinker for us to grab hold of and understand?
Yeah, so I would say that C.S. Lewis represents, to me, let me say it like this. I don't think C.S. Lewis had this gifting that just came about because he was some special protege. When you look at C.S. Lewis's life and you read about his development, he was, in my opinion, he was formed. He was a product of formation. Somebody who had the right formation along the way to become the thinker that he is. Okay. And in this time, this day and age that we're living in, I very much believe in what happened at the Azusa Street Pentecostal movement and the way that's affected Christianity. 25% of Christians today would identify as some form of Pentecostalism. And by definition, perhaps Pentecostalism is somebody who has had an experience with the Spirit, and that plays a part of how they interpret the text. But we don't have to do away with the thinking man's Christianity. And it's interesting to see how many Christians who are Pentecostal have some sort of affinity for C.S. Lewis, which tells me that there's a place for that type of Christian that's in there. And Lewis represents somebody who Oxford Don. He taught 30 years at Oxford. His writings were very influential. And Lewis really didn't start writing until he was, in his mid-30s. I mean, he's very well into his life. By the time that he started writing, Keats would have been dead. Lord Byron would have had most of his stuff written. Okay, so he started writing late in life, and it's that journey that he had that was imperative. I mean, he really set forth a lot of seamless arguments near Christianity, problem of pain. He wrestled with aspects of suffering, theodicy, that weren't just by the books, but were hit very close to home with him.
Totally. And you're writing your PhD in that area, right?
Yes, it's theodicy and suffering. Yeah, a Pentecostal exploration of theodicy and suffering and the apocalypse. One of those long, vague titles,
Yeah, totally. Which makes you a true academic.
Yeah, you're not supposed to, as long as nobody understands it, I'm doing my job. So
Totally, totally. No, that's great. Awesome. So yeah, no, that's a great reason to know Lewis. I think, yeah, he definitely speaks to our culture. And I heard Alistair McGrath, one of my favorite historical theologians, he said, he studied a lot of C.S. Lewis, and he said C.S. Lewis, knows that Christianity is not a faith that doesn't appeal to reason, but it's a faith that actually appeals beyond reason. So he goes into also like all of that imagination and the emotion and the encounter side of it, but starts with reason. And so C.S. Lewis is an amazing apologist and writer and thinker that actually can appeal to both in the human experience so well, like one with his fiction and the other with his fact. So
yeah, writing children's books. Yeah, he wrote
Mm.
children's books. He appealed to the imagination, but at the same time, I mean, the way that he eventually disavows atheism, right? He gets away from atheism. The way that it formed in him was through logic, okay, through the W.T. Kirkpatrick, and who was his mentor. He was formative, 16, 17, 18 years old, who helped him prepare for his time at Oxford. And he arrives at this atheism through logic, but then what works him out of that atheism is logic, because he says that he noticed, contradicting things were contradictory towards him. Okay, like it's contradicting life as an atheist, and he says that I didn't believe in God. I didn't believe that God exists, and I was angry that God existed. Or excuse me, I was angry at God for not existing.
Yeah.
What is that? He knew like something is wrong in this system. And so, you go through the story and he works his way out of atheism. He comes to believe in a spirit who is God, but you can't have a personal relationship with God. And he always talks about God goes on the offensive and God starts to take this offensive with him, which to me, it's like, as a Pentecostal, he doesn't use any Pentecostal language. He's not talking about any type of Pentecostalism, but that's like the Pentecostal experience. He's having this encounter with God. And if you're Barthian, where you believe you like Karl Barth, it's like Barth's whole thing was theology begins with an experience or an encounter with the divine. So he's not talking about Barth, but you have all this intersection at Lewis. We have Pentecostal experience with God. Barth, things begin with experience. Like, he's a real theologian, because I don't think you can do theology without having an experience with the divine. He's having these along the way. You see that in his experience with the bus. He's in a bus and he feels like, hey, God, or he's in this bus, he's driving up, okay, on this drive, and he's like, I could either allow God in or leave the door locked. And he says, without even having to make a decision, I realized I made a decision to open up myself to God, right? And so he is having this encounter with the divine, and then he goes out with Tolkien, and he has this conversation about sacrifice and why he's so disturbed by the sacrifice of Christ. And he starts to see that Christ is the true completion, the fulfillment of mythic language. And it's like all God is speaking to Lewis in ways that Lewis could understand. And so as a Pentecostal, I'm loving this. I'm like, this is beautiful.
I love that element of encounter. And that's why I'm doing this podcast, because I think there are these great thinkers, great theologians, and actually at the heart of it, like people like Thomas Aquinas, Blaise Pascal, C.S. Lewis, all of them, as you said, have this incredible encounter and experience with God that actually leads them to bring glory to God through their thinking, through their creativity, through their science, through their work. That we engage with. So I think it's so cool to bring both together. I think when we understand the person, we better understand their ideas and understand how they think and why they think that way. Yeah, so good, so good. So you've told us a little bit about C.S. Lewis's background. Do you want to tell us anything more about sort of how he came to faith, or his upbringing, or anything sort of important in his history?
Yeah, so in different books, there may be a chapter called The Great Knock, which I mentioned was W.T. Kirkpatrick. And this is a guy that Lewis is, and people don't really know this about Lewis. It's like, how did he like I said, how did he become who he became? He was formed that way. He was an avid reader, and he has all these, he talks about these, he uses language, these ditties, these poems that he would always get into, these reads, and a lot of them would memorize. They're really funny. He had just a real great sense of humor. but as a boy, he was an avid reader. And him and his brother go to this individual, and his name is W.T. Kirkpatrick, and he was sent to him by the father to help him prepare for his entrance exam into Oxford, right?
Mm.
And he tells this story about he's in the car, and they're going through Surrey, which is in England. I think it's like 30 miles north of London, somewhere around there. And he sees the countryside of Surrey, and he says, quote, that Surrey is a lot more wilder. The scenery in Surrey was a lot more wilder than he expected, right? And the great knock.
Yeah.
Okay, W.T. Kirkpatrick is in the car, and he slams the brakes on the car. And he looks at Lewis, and he says, what do you mean when you say wilder? And what gives you grounds for having expected it?
Yes.
And it's like, this guy is so logical that he makes Lewis think, like, what did I mean by that?
Makes him
and what do I
defend
mean when
every thought he's ever had. Yeah.
Exactly. And he's 16, right? He's 16. I mean, we say things today, and he basically says that he uses these Socratic thrusts, if you will.
Yeah, wow.
To just engage Lewis on everything, and makes him realize that what he said was meaningless, totally meaningless, right? And so this is how he develops as a logician. And of course, he wins an academic scholarship in Oxford, 1916, to go be a student at Oxford, right? And so when I hear this, it puts an added element to reading a book like Mere Christianity, because I've always said, if I get a crack at an atheist and we're exchanging books, whoever he gives me, right? Dawkins, Hitchens, or who you want to go back further before that, you go to the French philosophers, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm going to give him Lewis. Only because I feel that Lewis's arguments are very seamless, they're delicate, but he's making such a great case, and he knows why he's taken each step. But again, that's formed. It started at 16. He's around mentors. I think that God has given us a mind, he's given us a brain and a way at it. And so I appreciate that about him. But then again, he's so logical about everything that he gets to this place where he's trying to really reconcile who is Christ. And I think it's not just about God with Lewis. It's about who also is Christ.
Yeah.
And he wrestles with that. He's very open. It's not, for some people, it's about God. Oh, it's a higher power exists. But he's like, I believe that God was God, but I eventually came to believe that Christ is God. And I realized I'd gotten to a crossroad where I realized that this is not a matter of logic anymore. It's a matter of, what do I believe?
Yeah, wow.
And so for this great thinker, there is an element of faith.
Yeah.
That logic is taking you as far as it could go.
Yeah.
What are you going to do about Jesus? Are you going to believe? And again, speaking as a Pentecostal now, that shows me that it's not just logic in Lewis's life. It's not just his training. He's also, the operation of the Spirit is at work in Lewis's life, whether he says that or not.
Yeah, totally.
You notice that?
Yeah.
Right?
100%. Yeah, that's powerful, Chris. That's awesome.
So I think that, I encourage people listening to the podcast that it's not one or the other. You can have a thinking man's Christianity and have the work of the Spirit in your life. And I think that we should train people that way. And I'm always encouraged when I hear Pentecostal academics who are in the academy and trying to develop their brain. It makes me wish I could go back when I was 16 and put the Xbox and the Game Boy down and just do everything Lewis did. It'd be as smart as he is, but I don't think I'll ever get there.
You read the Screw Tape letters, right?
I read the Screw Tape letters, right? I'm on my way.
Yeah. No, that's awesome, Chris. Very cool. All right, so talked a little bit about C.S. Lewis's background, his history. What are some of his big ideas, his work, his essays, his books, different things? What are some of his major contributions to Christianity and Christian history?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, he's got a lot of stuff. I mean, you can talk about the Chronicles of Narnia, his fiction. I think I don't want to specifically talk about that because I'm more of a nonfiction type guy, although somebody else could probably do a better job with that. I would say I got my 3 favorite Lewis books. I should say I have four. I mean, they're all my favorite. Depends on what day you ask me.
You've got them physically with you. Amazing.
All right, I got them physically with you. Okay, a big part of Lewis's life. Let's, I could easily go for Mere Christianity and start talking about that. Okay, we all know about the BBC. They said, hey, try to raise the British morale and do some lectures on Christianity. So he does these lectures on Christianity, and he thinks they're a failure. But it ended up and his publisher's like, no, you need to put these into a book. And now we have Mere Christianity, which has got a lot of great quotes. I think that
brilliant defenses of the Christian faith for just the popular world. Hey.
Yeah, if you haven't read Mere Christianity, you're not saved. So end of story, right?
That's the way of salvation, is Mere Christianity, really. The Roman road.
It's water baptism and Mere Christianity. You're saved. You're in the kingdom now. You're good.
Yeah, totally.
A big part of Lewis's life was his relationship with his wife. And he gets this letter from this woman named Joy. He's really impressed by this letter. And he's like, I'll write back to Joy. And then long story short, it starts this correspondence back with him and Joy. And he really likes her. And then she comes to London and he has lunch with her at Oxford, gives her the tour, and he finds her wit just to be out of this world. And then he goes back to America, and then he never hears back from her. And then he finds out later through another letter, months later, that she's gotten a divorce, or she has this husband who has a mistress. And she asks him about, well, what do you think I should do about divorce? He's like, well, I think if there's, fornication or cheating, it's acceptable, blah, blah, blah. She ends up getting a divorce. She moves to London. Okay. He's in Oxford. She's in London. She moves to London with her 2 kids, and they become these really good friends. And then the British government tries to deport her back. And he goes to her and he's like, well, they don't have to deport you back if we get married. So it's a marriage of convenience, right? So they get married. It's a marriage of it's a marriage of convenience. And he's, doesn't really into the intimate type stuff. He's trying to help her out, and they stay friends. But then his wife gets sick and she gets bone cancer. Okay. And so he starts to go visit in the hospital, and they tell her, you need to tell her she's dying. So he goes to tell her that. But what's really interesting about Lewis is that he's like 50, he's in his mid 50s at this point, and he's never been married, or other than this marriage of convenience that he has. But he realizes in the hospital, this fake marriage, this marriage of, he didn't care. And his brother, tried to discourage him from doing it, who he's close to. And he goes to the hospital, and he realizes in the hospital when she's sick, I'm in love with this woman.
Wow.
I love her. So he asks her to marry him in the hospital, and they get married again in the hospital.
Crazy.
Because she's in love with him. But then she goes through, then what ends up happening is he asks the doctor, can he take her home? He brings her home, and the cancer goes into remission. He gets 3 years with Joy to enjoy marriage. So I say all to say that she's a huge element of his life, and you don't read. Are you crying? Are you crying over that?
These are tears streaming down my face.
I'm not really telling this sentimentally, I'm
such a beautiful story.
I'm being such a guy about the way I tell this.
No.
Well, so a big part of his life was his relationship with Joy, who he calls H. In my favorite C.S. Lewis book, A Grief Observed. I mean, this is the book.
That's a pretty raw book, hey? Yeah. Absolutely.
I can see, I was reading this one time, and I was, have Word of Faith friends, and I'm like, my Word of Faith friends would hate me for reading this book. You know what I'm saying? Because it's full of like grief and battling with sorrow, and Pentecostals, we want to praise the Lord, like, but this book is he's depressed, he's angry at God, he's upset, he's trying, and this book was really put together as just his journal writings, and someone encouraged him to publish it. Fun fact for you, he publishes it under a different name, and somebody tells him he should read this book, not realizing it's his book.
I didn't know he published it under a different name. What name did he publish it under?
That I can't remember. I'd have to tell you after the podcast. I actually have it in my book, Strange Scriptures, unashamed plug.
Cool.
But I put a little fun fact about that in there about how he published it under a different name. But
that's so interesting. I want to know now. I've definitely got to go and see.
Yeah. So you're gonna fact check me, Layla? Is that what you're gonna do?
I'm gonna fact check you. Yeah. It's interesting that in 2010 someone published it under the name Chris Palmer. Was that you ripping off Lewis?
They got the glasses with the nose on.
Yes. Amazing. A
Totally
grief
neat.
observed. Yeah.
By Chris Palmer. Exactly. He so I like some of the best writing I've ever read that maybe touched me the most powerful was in this book. He's talking about after her death, he fears losing the memory of his wife.
Wow.
Right? Because she was such an important part of him. Now, I can say that I understand that, how that is, because, when I lost different people in my life, that's what happens. You lose that memory, and that memory is what you cling to. It's what you're attached to.
All you have, sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Let me read
That's
to you
beautiful.
just, I don't want to say a brief excerpt. It's like a page. Can I read it? Is it okay?
Sure, go ahead.
I'll try to do my
Bedtime
best.
stories
James,
with Chris Palmer.
Bedtime stories. Yeah, let me try to do my best James Earl Jones or my best, what's his name? Morgan Freeman voice right now, okay?
Yeah, okay. Fantastic.
This is what he says. He said, today I had to meet a man I haven't seen for 10 years. And all that time, I thought I was remembering him well, how he looked and spoke, the sort of things he said. First 5 minutes of the real man shattered the image completely. Not that he had changed. On the contrary, I kept on thinking, yes, of course, of course. I'd forgotten that he thought that or disliked this or knew so-and-so or jerked his head back that way. I had known all these things once and I recognized them the moment I met them again, but they all faded out of my mental picture of him. Wow. And when they were all replaced by his actual presence, the total effect was quite astonishingly different from the image I'd carried about him for those 10 years. How I hope that this will not happen to the memory of H, that's his wife, Joy. That this is not happening already, slowly, quietly, like snowflakes, like the small flakes that come when it is going to snow all night. Little flakes of me, my impressions, my selections are settling down on the image of her. The real shape will be quite hidden in the end. 10 minutes, 10 seconds of the real H would correct all this. And yet, even if those 10 seconds were allowed me, 1 second later, the little flakes would begin to fall again. The rough, sharp, cleansing tang of her otherness is gone.
Wow, that's beautiful.
I don't know why that hits me so hard, but I think that anybody who is not wanting to lose struggles with that.
Totally.
So as a Christian who is a wannabe theologian, someone who hopes to be a theologian one day, trying to be a theologian.
Soon to be Dr. Chris Palmer.
Soon to be doctor. They give you those letters. It still doesn't know what it. It's funny. I had someone ask me a theological question today, and I was like, I have no clue. Yes, but I will do my best.
What does soteriology mean?
Yeah, you're right.
Does anyone really know?
Where's that first? It's like you're a doctor, but you don't know where Haggai is located in the Old Testament.
Yeah, for sure.
So I want to theologize with that. I want to take that and put it into theology and talk about the imagination or talk about the importance of memory. And there's just so many directions you could go with that. But I guess I appreciate Lewis's realness, his candidness when he wrote. He just has a way of getting to your soul. So I think that my favorite book by Lewis has to do with this.
Yeah, totally.
Right? I mean, sometimes you want a prophetic. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think why that book can speak so powerfully to our generation is I've seen many evangelicals and Pentecostals and stuff just walk away from their faith because they can't deal with that crisis of the problem of pain and suffering. And so I think, just having C.S. Lewis be able to speak into that in such a powerful way from a foundation of faith rather than some shaky, whatever foundation that, modern Christians are built upon these days, pop theology, whatever, TikTok theology. It can actually, I think that work can help save people, can help keep people sort of in the kingdom and in the purpose and will and plan of God for their lives, because I've definitely seen people walk away over that.
They walk away, but like I always say, where do you go after that?
It's like his book of Job, a grief observed.
Totally.
Yeah,
it is.
Wrestling with those things.
Yeah.
Do you have any other favorite C.S. Lewis books or works?
I do. I mean, we've already talked about this. This was my ninth
Screwtape
grade
Letters,
project to
brilliant.
get a girl in my class to like me. I've read through this. He
Definitely
always
helped you.
obviously he talks about his attempts. Okay, so this is. Do you know the backstory for this by any chance? Off the top of your head,
How
do you
he
know why
wrote
he wrote
it?
this?
No,
Why
I
he
don't
wrote
know
it? What
why
gave him
he
the
wrote
idea?
it. No.
This is actually interesting. During World War II, okay,
Yeah.
so he fought in World War One. He didn't really fight a lot in World War One. He got wounded from a British shell friendly fire. Okay, he ends up in the hospital. He recovers, but then the war is over by the time they send him back. So he really didn't do a lot of fighting. But in World War II, he talks about how there was all this German propaganda coming over the British radio, and one day he hears some British propaganda over the radio, and it's Hitler. And he really thinks about, as he hears Hitler, oh my gosh, what a compelling voice Hitler is. And it makes him realize what a compelling enemy we're fighting
Wow.
against the Nazi regime. And so this inspires him to realize Satan is a compelling enemy that we are
Wow.
fighting against. He's strategic. He's like a Nazi, if you will. He didn't say that, but he's like a Nazi,
Yeah.
And so what he does is it inspires him to write a book on the compelling strategies of Satan and the
Wow.
enemy. And so he writes a book on the psychology of temptation from the other side, from the demonic side of things. And
Yeah.
this book was so successful, it lands them on the cover of Time magazine in September 1947.
Crazy.
That's how successful the book was.
Amazing.
Yeah, and so he tells a funny story. If I can, let me see if I got this in here. Okay, so if you see this, you will notice who he dedicates the book to, right? Who is it? Can you read it? It says to, who's that to?
Tolkien.
Okay, so he writes it, he dedicates it to Tolkien. So it's like, why this book? Why did he write it? All the other books aren't Tolkien.
Because he's like the devil to him.
Yeah, right. Okay, do you know why he writes this to Tolkien? Why did he dedicate it to Tolkien? Super interesting. Tolkien was his toughest critic. So he takes some of the manuscript that he had written and he takes it to Tolkien and he asks Tolkien, do you want to read it? So he reads it and Tolkien basically is uneasy about it. He tells him, I'm unenthusiastic about it. I don't really like it. And Lewis is bothered by this. And he's not going to be able to get him to read the whole manuscript unless he dedicates the book
to him. Very manipulative friend. Their friendship is hilarious. We talked about it a bit in the first episode. But Tolkien's mean, man. He's no Chris Palmer. He's no encouraging friend.
I don't know.
No one
what
wants
do
him
they
to
say
be their
about
Yoda.
the lashes of a friend are better than the sweet words of an enemy? I don't know. Maybe I should be tougher on my friends.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
No,
I'm the kind of
cool.
guy
I
that's
never knew
like,
that. Sorry.
yeah. So he dedicates it to him, and so that he'd read it all, and I think this, if someone says I want to start Lewis, I'd say Mere Christianity, Screwtape Letters. I probably wouldn't give him the problem of pain. You have to sit with this one a little bit longer.
For sure.
The Abolition of Man. Abolition of Man is one of his better works, but it's tough. You got to sit with that one. The Great Divorce.
Difficult to understand. I think I've read The Abolition of Man a few times, and it wasn't until the second or third time that I was like, oh, I see what he's saying here.
Oh yeah,
because I've been so brainwashed. I am one of the people who've been brainwashed by education.
That's you. That's you.
Me.
There's a section in here where, let me see. I want to say it is. Let me get back to here. So, okay, so he has something called Screwtape Proposes a Toast. Okay, have you read this?
Of course, yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. So he talks about socialism. He gets into socialism. He gets into all this political stuff, which to me, for Lewis, let's see. And I didn't plan to read this. It's kind of ad lib. I'm just going to tell the people read it. Just read. You go online. You probably find a free PDF. Screw Tape Proposes the Toast. He gets into. It's just really relevant for that. If you're a TikToker, if you're listening, you're one of these.
You need to go and read that.
Read it. Exactly.
Well, yeah. So the two big things that were going on in his day was sort of like that he was grappling with Darwinism and Marxism, right? And I was like, how interesting. Like, of course he's going to be so relevant to us in this cultural moment right now, because he was like sort of taking these ideas on, but in a very creative way. You don't necessarily know that that's the idea that he's fighting against, but it's literally what he was dealing with, Marxism and Darwinism.
And it's interesting, going back to the original question you asked in the beginning, is why is he relevant today? I don't think that old writers ever become irrelevant.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? Like they may be old, but they're in an orbit, right? And they come around again.
Yeah.
If you're a good writer, and so I think like his orbit is coming around again because the issues of the day we're facing again.
Yes,
just
totally
in a different
agree.
form.
Absolutely. That's a great thought, Chris.
Well, thank you. I hope something's worth taking, in this, but
all of it. But that's very profound, I think, what you just said.
It's funny. It reminds me of a story where I used to have, when I first opened my church, I had a Sunday night service, Sunday morning service. Okay. So this one woman, she'd come every morning, every night. She never missed a service. And so on Sunday night, she came up to me and she goes, "Tonight was a really great sermon." And I'm thinking to myself, well, what do you think about the morning sermon?
Yeah. Everything else you do is absolute trash. But I really enjoyed tonight. For once.
Lewis, one of his worthy pieces that I think is not to be overlooked, is when he's writing the foreword for Athanasius on incarnation. Now, John may have touched on this because he's a church history guy. But he basically puts this forward, Athanasius, 4th century, 5th century. He goes back to writing why you should read on the incarnation, what every Christian should read this work, talking about wrestling with Christ's incarnation. But in that forward, he explains the importance of reading old books, and he proposes a solution that you shouldn't read a new book. For every new book you read, you should read an old book. So new book, old book, new book, old book. And his concern is basically, without quoting him, is that every book that comes forward, it comes forward in that generation's filter, postmodernism, modernism. And he's saying that if all you read is books in your time, you have a filter on and you can't see outside of that filter. Right? Totally. But so what old books do is it recreates the filter.
Yeah, and I love his basic premise and belief that like a new idea is not a better idea just because it's new. It doesn't make it better. It might actually make it worse. Yeah, so I love his commitment to the old. Like, very cool.
And as you as a teaching pastor, me as a pastor, we could repurpose that and say, and a new sermon doesn't make it a better sermon. Let's preach old sermons.
Absolutely. Yeah. Old ideas, old thoughts. There's nothing new under the sun. So if it's new, it might be heretical.
Oh, I got, me, my best sermons I've preached 20 times. You know what I mean? Like I get my old sermons. Just change the title. Your congregation doesn't even realize it.
They're not listening, except this one lady who's listening tonight. That one lady who's like, she's like, that was a good one today. For once.
You just changed the title on that. How dare you?
Yeah. Very cool. Do you have any other favorite quotes that you want to, or just big C.S. Lewis quotes?
See, I mean, what do you want to do? Let's go through all these. I think that Lewis, let me just say this. I think that for those listening, if you haven't read Lewis, everything he writes is a quote. You can literally open up. We should make a new game. We should make a new game. Just open up a book and just see if it's a quote. Ready? I'm closing my eyes. Boom. What makes them so sure? I don't mean that I fear the worst at all. Nearly her last words were, "I'm at peace with God." She had not always been, and she never lied. And she wasn't easily deceived, less of all in her own favor. But why are they sure that all anguish ends with death? More than half the Christian world and millions in the East believe otherwise. So he is either always setting up an argument or he's going somewhere with it.
Yeah.
He's a quote machine.
That's brilliant.
For people that, just want to use Lewis quotes, but not read them, they miss out. And then they're always Surprised by Joy is a great book by him. The Four Loves, a great book by him. Miracles is a great book by him. I mean, you can get these in a box set. There's just really no end with him.
Yeah.
He is criticized by a lot of theologians for not being the greatest theologian. I don't think that the last third of his book, Mere Christianity, is like great theology, but I appreciate his arguments for God. I think those are seamless. I know in theology school, people are like, yeah, his theology was, but he doesn't claim to be a theologian. He doesn't claim to be.
That's not what he's going for.
Yeah, he's not what he's going for. My advisor always says, you can criticize me on the line that I draw, but if I didn't attempt to draw that line, I told you I wasn't drawing that line. Don't criticize me for not having drawn it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So he's not a theologian. He knows it. He's not a church, a vicar. He's not any of that. He just tries to give you his logic. And so Lewis wasn't concerned about trying to change Christian doctrine. He wasn't attempting to go against or repurpose Christian doctrine. All he wanted to do was defend it. That's all he wanted to do.
Yeah. And almost like just represent his journey of like struggling with these ideas as an atheist and coming to the realization that they don't hold up. Like it doesn't, it's no match for Christianity. And he was almost a reluctant convert. He's like, oh no, I have to be a Christian now. He's like, I didn't want to be one.
I'm stuck.
Yeah.
I gotta be a Christian. Yeah. That was Lewis for you. I think that he inspires all of us. Like I said before, he was. It's interesting. He was glad that he didn't write or do the majority of the bulwark of his writing until the later half of his life. I mean, like I said before, when you look at when he did his writing, by the time he was in his mid-30s, Chesterton had already published 5 of his best books.
Yeah, wow.
Byron had 2/3 of his work done.
Wow.
And Lewis hadn't even really gotten started. So it just goes to show people are at different places at different times.
Yeah.
And he would have had to retract that or change it or fix it. So God knew what he was doing with Lewis's life.
Yeah.
And what I like about him is he had a maybe why I'm the guy that does stuff on suffering. So I see suffering and everything. Maybe why his writings were as effective as they were and why we see Christ in him is because he was a man who was familiar with suffering like Jesus.
Yeah, totally.
I mean, his childhood was difficult. So he lost his mother. He was in war. He saw war. I mean, it's very evident that he's concerned about that wartime individual who had been in war because he writes about it in the Screwtape Letters. And he basically tells, what's his name? Wormwood and Screwtape are having a conversation about how to subdue the mind of someone who had been in war. When they see body parts and death around them, what he should get Wormwood to begin to think, the man to think about that. So he'd been a part of it. He'd seen suffering, and he was a lonely guy. I mean, his brother was his best buddy, and then he loses his wife, and he's a flawed man. He never said he wasn't. So all that to say, his writing is somewhat compassionate, and it resonates with you. So I appreciate that about him.
Totally. Do you have any fun facts before we go? Fun facts on C.S. Lewis that you want to share?
This one is for all the single folk out there.
Oh,
Lewis
okay.
Okay.
The Lonely Hearts United Club.
The Lonely Hearts United Club. Lewis never thought he was going to get married. Ever believed that he was going to get married. I believe he was either 56 or 58 when he finally got married to his wife. That's a long time to wait. Okay.
Yes.
So he married later in life. Let me see. I do have some fun facts I wrote down. Okay. His nickname, of course, was Jack. Jaxie. You know why they gave him that nickname?
Why?
You don't know this? We didn't get to this one yet?
I think I do know, but you tell. I want you to be able to tell us.
You're like, somebody.
He named himself Jaxie.
he did name himself Jaxie.
Yeah.
You know why he did that though? He named himself Jaxie because his dog's name was Jaxie, and his dog got hit by a car, and he felt his dog was Jaxie. His dog got hit by a car, so he named himself Jaxie, and it just stuck. So he was Jaxie.
So now I'm Jaxie. He actually believed in reincarnation as a kid.
Did he really?
No, I'm just making.
No, he didn't. He was born in North Ireland, so everyone thinks he was English, but he was born in North Ireland. Okay, he came to boarding school. His dad put him on a ship, sent him. It was a rough voyage for them, and he went to his school. When he was at his school, this is interesting. He went to this place where he had this really cruel, I don't know if you call him a schoolmaster or whatever. His name was Oldie. He always abused the kids. Yeah. So he's abusing all these kids, and he was hurting them. And then the guy gets fired. They did an investigation on him, and then he was diagnosed as clinically insane. So imagine all the suffering he saw as a 10-year-old boy.
Yeah, insane.
In the boarding school. Yeah. So he saw a lot. Again, I think all of this goes, so maybe I'm creating my own fact. C.S. Lewis knew what suffering was.
Yeah. And
I think that this is important. One of my friends told me this when I was 21 years old, almost 22. Still is one of the best preachers I know. And when I say best preachers, articulate, but you believe him when he's preaching, right? And he's got all this amazing.
When you say best preachers, you mean almost as good as me.
You know what? Let me retract my statement. He's the second best preacher I know. The best one being you, Layla, being you. There's Layla and this guy.
Yeah.
Okay. But you know what? I haven't seen you preach actually. I've seen you do like talks. So still, you have one shot. I'm gonna be watching you like 6.8, 10.5, 9.9.
I'll send my best. No, sorry to interrupt you with my foolish comments.
I know, I was getting ready to land the punch and you just
sorry.
It's all right. So he said, I was this young man at camp, and I was like, how are you such a good preacher, man? Like, how do you do this so well? He goes, all of the preaching you hear that's convicting, all of my best, quote unquote, to use Pentecostal language, revelation, comes from moments of pain and suffering. Wow. It was in those moments where the Lord taught me, where I found what I'm preaching.
Wow.
And so I've always included the element of what makes a good preacher, what makes a good writer, what makes a good anything. I really believe you have to have that element of suffering. If it's not there, something's incomplete. I'm not saying you go looking for like, okay, God, it's time for me to suffer, but you don't have to look for it.
Yeah,
life has enough suffering as it is.
Life will do that to you, 100%. Yeah, you learn something in the valley that you don't learn on the mountaintop. And obviously,
have you ever? Yeah, I mean, have you ever heard someone and you're like what they're saying is right, but it doesn't land. You know what I mean? It just doesn't hit. I think that it could be for a lot of reasons, but I think one of them is they haven't learned by way of suffering yet, and I think Lewis did, and it's very clear in his writing.
Totally.
So, yeah.
Well, Chris, we might finish up there. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today. You are an absolute genius. As I said before, you've got many books that the people can check out. You're a Greek scholar doing a PhD in suffering and different things like that, Pentecostal theology. You are a pastor. You've got all of this stuff going for you. Where can people find you on Instagram, Facebook, all those sorts of things?
You forgot Memester. That's my new thing now.
The meme lord at Theos. Theos memes. You're like, that's my number one. That's my MO in life. That's my mission. You know how Paul was like, Paul, an apostle, like called to be an apostle. You would be Chris, called to be a meme lord. That's your number one calling.
Yeah, it's like I made that one meme. It shows that guy handing out his business card. Me at the church growth leadership conference. It says the card said "Meme Lord." You love it. You love it. You make great memes. They can find me at. They can find me. Thank you. They can find me at Chris Palmer on Instagram or chrispalmer.me. I will say, if you do pick up one of my books, make sure you read it before you read one of C.S. Lewis's books, because it ain't going to compare.
Read them now, quickly, and then dive into all the C.S. Lewis books we've been talking about.
Yeah. Read my book first, then read Lewis's book. Put Lewis's book on the shelf. Put my book as a doorstop. It'll be perfect.
No, you're brilliant. A brilliant writer in your own right. But thank you so much for being part of it and teaching us more about C.S. Lewis.
Thank you, Layla.
Yeah, it's been so great to have you on. And we'll see everybody else watching. We'll see you on our next episode. Catch you later. Thanks so much for tuning into the Eagle and Child podcast. That's all from us for today. If you want to support us, you can like, subscribe, or drop us a review. And don't forget to follow us on Instagram @Eagle and Child Podcast. We'll catch you next time. Much love.